In this video, I'm going to show you some advanced techniques you can use when editing in Adobe Premiere. Start off by importing some footage into your program. Right now, I'm using the clips you can find under Class Assets, number 5, Review Lecture. In this video, we're going to talk about our preview panel over to the left-hand side here. It's the one that says Source up at the top. In order to activate it, just double-click on any of the clips down in your library. It will automatically get an image from the clip that I just clicked on. Right now I'm using this one called One Tropical Beach. The technique I'm about to show you is called 3-point editing. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to make more precise edits from the onset rather than having to drag in entire clips into our Premiere timeline and edit them from within here. Right now, thanks to this timecode on the right-hand side of our preview window, I can tell that this clip is a little over 10 seconds long. Let's say I knew I only wanted to import 5 seconds of this clip, and I wanted it to end right after we pass this little puddle on the right-hand side. I'm going to go until we're just beyond it, which fortunately for me looks like it's about 5 seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and make an out point. If you don't remember how to do that, the keyboard shortcut is O. You can also use the brackets down here, just below our preview window. Then I'll go to the very beginning of this clip and make an end point. Now what I can do is I can drop this in and out point section directly into my timeline. And the way I do this is by hitting the period button. Right there you can see that a clip that is exactly 5 seconds long was just dropped into my Premiere. If I drag in the original clip with my in out points turned off, if you don't remember how to do that, hit Option X, you can see that the original clip was about twice as long. This will be really helpful, especially if you're using any footage of people talking where it's a particular scene in a movie and you know you only want a couple of lines or so from any individual clip. Rather than having to sift through the entire thing in your timeline, you can just do it before even bringing it in. Now for fun, I'm just going to drag in this clip of a sloth and this clip of a snake into my timeline without really editing anything. Now let's say that I decide, you know what, this clip of a beach really doesn't fit in with the rest of what I have here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And instead I'm going to use some footage from this clip called Nature. I'll start from this little snake on a tree here. And I'm going to go ahead and set an end point. Now down in my timeline, because I have this 5-second gap, what I can do is called backfilling, which means I'm going to say I want a clip from up here to fit exactly in this section here. What I do is I go to the end of this gap here. I'm just going to press the down arrow key to do that. I'm going to hit out. I'm going to go to the beginning of it and press I for in. Now I'm going to click on my preview, and since I told it already where I want to start this clip at, all I have to do is hit period. Now that I've done that, exactly 5 seconds of this video, starting from where I had my endpoint, has been placed directly into that gap. Now I'm going to do pretty much the same thing again. I'll make an in and out point around this gap, but this time I'm going to go ahead and make another out point for myself, and I'm going to purposely make sure that it's longer than 5 seconds. And now I'm going to hit period. What happens is that I now have this pop-up saying that this clip duration does not fit within the gap that I'm trying to put it in because it's considerably longer than 5 seconds long. So I now have some options. I can change the clip speed, which is similar to our time remapping, which we were talking about in previous videos. I can ignore the source endpoint, which means ignoring the endpoint on my actual preview window. And what that means is that it'll say, I'm going to take the out point you set and make that be the final moment and only show the 5 seconds previous to this out point. Same thing for ignore source out point. What it'll say is I'm going to ignore this out point and only show 5 seconds from this endpoint. I can ignore the sequence out point, which means what'll happen is if I hit OK, this whole clip is just going to fill up this whole section regardless of the fact that other things are in its way. I'm going to go ahead and show you each of these options. So if I change the clip speed, I'll hit OK. What it's done is it's just majorly sped up this clip. I'll do it again. This time I'll hit ignore source endpoint. Now what it's doing is it's starting later on in this clip than where I initially asked it to. I'll hit ignore source out point, and now it's ignoring all the things after 5 seconds after this clip starts. I'll hit ignore sequence endpoint, and not much is going to change because right now my sequence endpoint was at the very beginning of this clip. If I had had other things in front of it, it would have overwritten them. And if I hit sequence out point, it just overwrote all of the footage that I had up until the end of this clip. You can set an in-out point for yourself pretty much wherever you want in your timeline and still do this exact same thing. You can even set just an in point somewhere, press period, and it'll go ahead and just drop in for you if you know what section you want from up here. Now let's say that I knew I needed this whole clip for some reason, but right now I don't have enough space in my timeline to place it. I could move my clips apart and then attempt dropping it in and bring my clips back together, or there's a much faster option. Up until this point, I've had you hitting the period button. Period means overwrite, which means that as soon as I hit it, it's going to write over everything that was already in front of it. This time hit comma, and now you'll notice that my footage just got pushed apart. The comma button means insert, and so what that's doing now is it's just placing my footage in between two things instead. If you, for whatever reason, you forget what the keyboard shortcuts are, you can just go underneath your preview window and see the same two options right here, insert and overwrite. They're directly next to the little camera that asks you to export a frame. Now, some other tools that you have at your disposal in order to speed up your editing are called markers. I'm going to go ahead and just drag in this full clip called Nature. I'm not going to worry about my other clips right now. Markers allow us to make notes on our actual footage. Let's say that I want to mark every section where a snake pops up in this video, because maybe I'm making a documentary about snakes. All I have to do is play through until I find a moment with a snake, and then making sure that I've clicked on my footage, press the letter M. If you look in my timeline, you can now see that a little green mark has been made. You can also see it up in my preview window across the timeline there. Now I can make some further information about this mark by either double-clicking on it, or while my playhead is still on top of it, pressing M again. And now I can go ahead and name it. So I'll call this one Green Snake. And since it's a snake, I'll just leave it green. I could make comments if I wanted to. I could say how long this clip lasts for, so by setting an in-out point around it, I can see that it lasts for 5 seconds and 9 milliseconds. And now I know that this section of my footage has a green snake on it. I can keep scrolling forward, and eventually I find another snake. I'll make an in-out point so that I know how long the snake is on screen for, 3 seconds and 1 millisecond. And then I'll go to my in point since that's where this image starts at. And to quickly go to an in or an out, just hold down Shift and press I to go to in, and Shift O to go to out. And I'll go ahead and make another marker. And I'll call this one Tan Snake, and I'll mark down its time code at 3 seconds and 1 millisecond. So now that I've made a couple of marks for my snakes, let's say I want to make marks anytime a sloth appears. Here's one here. I'll go ahead and make an in out, so I know that this clip lasts for 6 seconds and 18 milliseconds, and I'll make a mark. I'll call it Sloth, mark it for 6 seconds and 18 milliseconds. And so for me to know visually very quickly that this is not a snake, I'm going to go ahead and change the color of my marker, and I'll make this one orange instead, and press OK. And I'll keep scrolling until I find another sloth, which starts here. Make my in and out, Shift I to go to my in point, press M, and I'll call it Distance Sloth. Mark my duration, and change my marker color. So now, both in my timeline itself and up in my preview window, I can very quickly see where I've made all of my marks, and I can get to them by just clicking on them quickly. This will be very helpful for you, especially working on your trailer projects when you're dealing with a lot of footage at once. I'm going to quickly go to my assembly window to show you one other neat things about markers. In our assembly window, over by our library, you may notice at the top there's an option that says markers. I'll go ahead and click on it, and then I'll click on my clip in the timeline. And as soon as I do, you can see all of my different markers pop up. If I only want to see my sloth clips, I just click on the orange. Now I can quickly see my sloth clips and where they're beginning and ending at, so that I can find them fast in my timeline if for whatever reason I wasn't seeing them there. I can do the same thing with my snake clips. One final thing that I want to show you is how to save select moments in clips. I'm going to go ahead and make a bin for myself, and I'm going to call it Selects. And then I'm going to go into my bin. I'll zoom in on this clip, and I'll go ahead and cut out this footage of my sloth here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this clip and just drag it over to my library and drop it in the bin. Now when I drag it into my timeline again, all I have is this sloth. Again, this will be very useful for you as you're working on your trailer projects. With 3-point editing, markers, and selects, you're now going to be able to start editing at a much faster speed than you've been able to up until this point.